I want to talk about something that I has kind of been on my heart for the past couple of days. For those of you that don't know, I am a trauma therapist. So I specialize in trauma. I do a lot of trauma work as it relates to CSA, GRAPE, and combat. That's what I do day to day. And something at least as it relates to women that look like me, we talk about sex a lot. We talk about the lack of education that we received. Most of us we were taught two things, right? Don't get pregnant and wait until you're married to have sex. And I want to talk about how that failed a generation of women. I want to talk about how we didn't receive the necessary education about sex, to even be told that we should be emotionally ready and what it looks like to be emotionally ready to have sex. And so I want to talk about that today. I realize that this is a sensitive topic, so I want to apologize to you in advance. And I want to always let you know that anything that I bring to you is never to shame you, but so that we can have true healing, right? Here at Heal the New Sexy, we say that we discuss all things healing, self-love, and relationships. I read a book in 2024 called Stolen Women. I'm looking at it. It's called Stolen Women, Redefining Our Sexuality, Taking Back Our Lives. And something she mentioned in there is how the difference between Black women and white women, right? Black women are not given the necessary tools in order to make informed decision as it relates to sex. And often we learn about sex through two sources, through the media and through our friends, all right, which can lead to a lot of misinformation. Versus our white counterparts that often, I remember being in high school, and one of the girls there had gained weight. And people were commenting on her weight. And she was like, well, I'm on birth control. And the birth control caused me to gain weight. And I was like, girl, what? Birth control? Because that was not something that I was taught about. And so, I just feel like this is a conversation that we need to have. And if you're a mother watching this, I want to encourage you to talk to your daughter or have her come join and watch this video, because it's so necessary that we have true conversations about sex with our children. It shouldn't just be don't get pregnant, right? Sex has to do more with just getting pregnant. And I feel like that was the outcome that most of our parents were focused on. They were focused on the pregnancy, but they weren't focused on STDs. They weren't focused on our emotions. They weren't focused on attachment and some of this stuff that they didn't know. However, a lot of them did, right? They may not articulate it the way that I'm getting ready to, but they had the information to give us. Our mothers and our grandmothers had the information to tell us the truth about men. Okay? All right. So, many of us weren't taught how sex works. We weren't taught how emotions attach as it relates to sex. We weren't taught how men behave when sex is involved, or the lengths that they will go to in order to have sex, whether it's manipulation or coercion, right? We were just told not to get pregnant, and somehow we were supposed to, figure out the rest on our own. I know many women who I've worked with who weren't taught about contraceptives, so birth control, condoms, those type of things. They weren't taught about that. They were just told, don't you get pregnant. I know some women who, because of CSA or GRAPE, they ended up being pregnant. Nobody talked to them about sex, but they were taken to the clinic in order to end the pregnancy. These are the type of scars that we carry, that we need to address, that we need to ensure that the generations after us don't experience the things that we experience, because the people in our lives weren't willing to have honest conversations with us as relates to sex. All right. I know this is a little uncomfortable. So again, no shame, nothing. All right. I want to say this because women have been made the gatekeepers as it relates to pregnancy. I hear more conversation about women being told don't get pregnant versus men being told you need to wear a condom. Don't get that girl pregnant. You know what I'm saying? Men are usually encouraged to go out to have sex with multiple partners, and women are encouraged to be chaste, which doesn't make sense, because who are these men having sex with? All right. And don't be like, oh, all of them aren't. Okay. Right. So many women weren't being reckless. We were just misinformed. We didn't have the information that we needed in order to make an informed decision. Okay. Don't get pregnant wasn't education. It was fear. Let's be honest. Right. Many, be like, oh, you can't bring that baby. You can't bring no baby here. You bring a baby here, you get pregnant, you gonna be put out. And I know women that were removed from their family home, were put out because they got pregnant. And the thing is, they just didn't have the education. They didn't have the information. And information today is readily available, but I'm talking about the generation before, okay? When I was growing up, I graduated high school in 2006. I remember having to take, you remember how to take the phone line and plug it into the internet so you could get online? Okay, all right. You know what I'm saying? And so that information wasn't available. I remember, being, I think in the 5th grade, and they showed us about how the egg and the sperm, but they didn't talk to us about the emotions. They didn't talk to us about the games that men play as it relates to sex. So you could be thinking that you are going into this loving relationship. Meanwhile, he just wants sex. Many of us weren't taught that. Many of us didn't have fathers. My father was in the home, but he never talked to me about, listen, this is how a man shows up. This is how a man shows up wanting to have sex with you. I remember R.C. Blake's in his book, Father-Daughter, talked about, it was in one of his videos, how a man will tell his daughter, don't have sex, but he'll go and take his son out the back door and then teach the son all the skills he needs in order to disarm girls. So many of us, even if our father taught us, look at my shirt, it says naughty. Even if our fathers taught us, don't have it. There was men that taught their sons tools and tricks, and this is what you say. This is how you treat her. You make her feel like she's the only one. You let her know, like, this is what people do, when they love each other. And then after that, he gets up, he zips his pants up, and you never see him again. Listen, don't get pregnant. Right, was a burden placed entirely on us. It told us that our body is dangerous. I grew up in church. I grew up in purity culture. Right, you don't want to tempt that man, so you have to wear slips and stockings and your skirt down all the way to your ankles. Meanwhile, you see how these men be coming to church now? My gosh, pants tighter than mine. Right? That your desire is irresponsible. Your sexuality is a liability. Many of us have been talked out of our sensuality, talked out of our sexuality. So when you get married, you can't even enjoy your husband because of the things that were taught to you about you that weren't true. Okay? But they never told us how ovulation actually works. What consent feels like emotionally. Not that you shouldn't be ever pressured to have sex with a man. And even when you're married, if you don't want to have sex, you don't have to have sex. Now, some of you going to say, the Bible says don't deny one another. But why is that always geared towards women? Why is that not geared towards men? Are women the only partner in the marriage that says no, they don't want to have sex? But also when it talks about not denying your spouse, they never talk about, again, the emotional part. So your husband can treat you any kind of way, and we've seen this, and still expect to have sex with you. That doesn't feel like intimacy. That doesn't feel like safety. Okay? So yes, that scripture says that, but there's more to it. Don't just deny it. When it says don't deny your spouse your body, also don't deny your spouse your kindness, your care, your consideration, emotional safety, financial safety, trust, transparency. Don't deny your spouse that. You give your spouse, give a woman all of that, you ain't gonna have to worry about her not wanting to be with you. Okay? Listen, how we didn't talk about how attachment forms through sex, how men often detach after sex, how power dynamics shift once sex enters a relationship. Many of you may have felt very vulnerable after you had sex, and you didn't have the words or the language that, okay, he said he loves me, we have sex, and then all of a sudden I feel exposed. Or how about the girl that has sex with the boy, and then he goes to the school and he tells everybody? We weren't prepared for that. We weren't prepared for how you lost your virginity to that man and he told everybody now all of a sudden you a hoe and you were easy. When that was never the case. How he slandered your name. You were just told don't get pregnant and wait until you got married to have sex. So the emotional part of it, nobody prepared you for. Nobody prepared you for. Okay? So some women internalize this lie that if something goes wrong, it's my fault. You've internalized the shame. You've internalized the guilt when really you weren't given the information that you needed. Okay. Now let's talk about waiting until marriage and the other things that should have been taught to us. Right. So yes, you talk about waiting to marriage. Okay, cool. But you need to know things about sexual compatibility. Are you compatible? I remember working with a client and she was like, I did everything he wanted me to do sexually. He still cheated on me. Yes, because you can't be compatible with lust. You can't be compatible with a man who don't have discipline. He doesn't have sexual discipline. You can't be compatible with that, right? Desire differences. There's gonna be times I remember he was a comedian and he was talking about how his wife, got to her sexual peak and he was like, ooh, I know the Lord ain't do this to me. Ooh, right? Because a man's sexual peak is at a different time than a woman's sexual peak. So she will desire sex more at one period than he does, and he may not be able to keep up. Right? Communication as it relates to sex, as it relates to intimacy, pleasure, what pleasure looks like, trauma. Many of you haven't shared, and I'm not telling you to, the trauma that you've experienced. So there may be sexual acts and certain things and language that triggers you and you're not interested in it. All right? We were told to wait until we marriage to have sex, but we weren't taught about emotional safety or the reality that marriage does not magically fix sexual dysfunction. Some of you may have sexual disorders as it relates to trauma. And marriage doesn't abracadabra that. There's work. You need to see a sex therapist, right? I got accepted to a program and I'm really excited about that. To help you with that. There are some sexual dysfunctions that you need to meet with somebody to help you work through that, okay? So women did one or two things. They entered marriage sexually unprepared and ashamed because of purity culture, or explored sex secretly without guidance, safety, or emotional readiness. Either way, we were set up to struggle. And point number two, or explored sex secretly, then you were dealing with guilt, you were dealing with shame, you're like, oh my God, forgive me. But we are sexual beings. So there's going to be some interest in the sex. Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. You ever told a baby, don't touch it, it's hot, don't touch it, it's hot, don't touch it, it's hot. What? All right. But if you tell the baby, right, you go over there and say, listen, it's hot. It will burn you. It will hurt. It doesn't feel good. So you don't touch it. You can move their hand a little bit close. You feel the heat, that's heat. But if you touch it, it's going to be hot. Then you move the baby from it. Then you put parameters around the heater so the baby can only get so close. And many of us didn't have parents that had honest conversation with us as it relates to sex, sexuality, honest conversations as it relates to our development. Okay, yeah, you got your period, but what does that mean? Yes, that means you can get pregnant, but how does ovulation works? Okay, why are men? I remember being 16. I don't know. I remember being 14 and there was a man after me. He was grown, honey, and I didn't understand why is this grown man after me. And I remember telling him, listen, I remember, okay, I think I told this story before, but I'll tell it again. So where I lived in Marshall Heights in Kitzingen, Germany. You probably can Google Marshall Heights and you can see it. And there was this hill that you had to walk up, and there were townhomes in the back. And so I had to walk up, and he had this car. And I knew his car everywhere. Whenever I would see his car, I always ducked. But this time, there was only one way for me to get to where I wanted to, and it was dark. And I remember him I remember walking up the hill, and he slowed his car down, and he rolled his window down. And I said, I don't know what they told about you. I don't know what they told you about me, but I'm 16, I'm a virgin. I don't know nothing about that. I don't know nothing. And he said, go home. You talk about somebody who skedaddled. I skedaddled. I didn't understand why that man was after me at 16. And guess what? I didn't have a relationship with my parents to tell them there's a man in his 20s and he's after me. And every time he sees me, he says something sexual and he gives me a look and it makes me uncomfortable. And then I could be at school, at football practice and he's there. I could be walking to the PX and he's there. I could be here. He lives in the neighborhood. I didn't have that. And many of you probably didn't have a relationship with your parent that you could openly talk to them about sex. I didn't have that. And you know why I probably wouldn't have told my parents? Because I was raised in a home where there was a lot of criticism, okay? And it was chaotic and it was unhealthy. So I felt, and there was a lot of blame. Something go wrong, it's your fault. So I felt if I would have told them about him, then they were gonna blame me. Well, what you doing at that man in your face? Why keep them boys out your face? Why them boys in your face? Listen, if I'm built like a brick house and I'm sweet like honey, I can't control that a bee is going to want to be near me. And the truth is, many of you were beautiful, you were young, you were beautiful, and your parents should have did a better job of protecting and guarding you, not accusing you of out there being fast and trying to attract somebody when you knew nothing about that. When you were being pure, you were living a holy life. But guess what? There were men out there, there were boys out there, and their parents wasn't telling them to pipe down. Their parents wasn't talking to them about purity, so they didn't have the same conversation you were having, so they were after you. And meanwhile, your mama and everybody else is accusing you of being fast. How I'm being fast, and I'm walking up the hill. I used to work at Pizza Hut. There's a Pizza Hut in Marshall Heights. I'm working at Pizza Hut. I done got off. I'm walking. I'm not being fast. Now, let me tell you the flip side of it. Even if you were being fast, no grown man should be after you. And even if you were being fast, that is a behavior. Why are women or young children being fast? Because somewhere in your history may have been introduced to sex prematurely. You were taught this is how you get love, or you were looking for love because the house you came from, there was none. I said what I said. Ain't no child fast. Fast. Okay, hypersexuality. Let me say this. Hypersexuality is a sign of post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay. If you want to know more about that, if you're like, Cynthia, I did some things and I'm not proud of them, but you said that about hypersexuality, schedule, book a call. I'll talk to you about it. I'll educate you. I'll get you right together. I'm going to get that shame and everything in that guilt. Ain't no such thing as fast. Okay. All right. Listen, let's talk about how emotional readiness was never part of the conversation. No one ever asked, are you emotionally safe with him? How does he make you feel? Outside of, oh, I love him, he loves me. No, does he make you emotionally safe? Does he make you feel seen, heard? Does he not minimize the things that you express to him? Does he make fun of you? Does he say you childish because you don't want to have sex? Right? Does he respect your boundaries? Does he disappear after intimacy? Right? Are you bonding faster than he is? Are you falling, but he's not falling in love with you? Are you romanticizing him? Are you making it more and he's allowing you to because he wants to benefit from it? Right? Sex education skipped the most important part. Sex doesn't just connect our bodies, it connects our nervous systems. Are you having sex with him to soothe yourself? Are you having sex with him because you're anxious and you feel like if I don't, he will leave me? Or did you have sex with him in the past because you believed that you had to give your body to these men? Because if not, they will leave you and you struggle with abandonment and maybe you have an abandonment wound. Okay? So women who had sex with men who couldn't emotionally lead, right, had no intention of commitment. That's why we got these friends with benefits and situationships. Why are we as women engaging in that? I got needs. Yeah, you got needs, but your need is more than sexual. And the problem is in that moment for some men, that's the only time they're really emotional. That's the only time they really connect with you. So you're giving up sex because you sense that that's the only time that he's vulnerable with you. No, he should be vulnerable with his pants up and his dick down. Okay, all right. You used intimacy for validation, right? And these men disappeared once they got access. And you may have blamed yourself for caring too much. And there's some women you've kind of adapted. So now you cold. So you've detached your physical intimacy with your emotional intimacy. And now you got men who want to commit to you and they confused. And you're like, okay, so hey, get up, go on. Hey, you can't sleep here, go on. That's why many women are talking about I don't want to live with a man. Because you've detached your emotional intimacy and your physical intimacy, all right? So we don't talk enough about the emotional toll. How many of us had to make decisions alone. How that man took you to the clinic and dropped you off. He ain't even walk in and hold your hand. Here in Georgia, before the ban, you used to have to listen to the heartbeat. That man didn't even come in the room and listen to the baby's heartbeat. You had to listen to that baby's heartbeat before they ended the pregnancy. Or that man just kept taking you to the clinic every time you got pregnant. Carrying the shame in silence, grieving the pregnancies and the relationships that you lost at the same time, being bullied into ending the pregnancy, and that man telling you if you didn't, that he was going to leave you, and so you wanted him, And so you did what you felt like you needed to do at the time. And we've known women that have even suffered violence when they didn't end the pregnancy. Okay. Not because you were careless, but because no one prepared you for the reality of sex, the responsibility of sex. Nobody even told us not to get pregnant, but they didn't talk to us about STDs and how they're contracted. And even the lifelong implication that could be, depending on what STD that you contracted. Again, no shame. No condemnation over here, right? Okay? This is not a generation that wasn't disciplined as it relates to sex. This is about a generation that was undereducated. What we should have been taught is how to understand our cycle and fertility. And I'll be on TikTok and the girls be talking about your luteal phase and this. I'm like, my gosh. Right? You know? How attachment forms through intimacy, how we get connected, and how men attach differently than women do. And so that's why when you have sex, you may feel attached to him, but he's still not attached. Because how a man gives his heart is very different than how we do. When a man looks for love is very different than how we do. Okay? The difference between desire and safety, because you can desire a man and he not be safe. You know how you, I tell you, listen, I used to love a hyper masculine man, but they were not safe. They fine. But they're not safe, okay? Right? How men and women experience sex differently. For him, how it can just be physical. But for you, it's emotional, okay? That boundaries are protection, not punishment. And so even, even you having sexual boundaries, okay? And you should have sexual boundaries in the membership. I have a video video titled, Teach Him How to Have Sex With You Without Taking Your Clothes Off. You're going to want to watch that because I talk about sexual boundaries. As it relates to intimacy, right? You should be clear what your boundaries are. If you're like, I don't want to have sex, then does that mean I'm not having just penetrative sex? I'm not having oral sex? No sex. We can hug, we can kiss, we can make out. But as it relates to that, okay, we're not doing that. You need to be very clear with that. And a man who pushes against that, that's not a safe man, okay? That sex is not currency for commitment. Many women have been taught that if you have sex with him, you're going to lock that man down and he's going to be with you. And that's not true. You can have sex with that man, marry that man. You can have that man's babies. He will commit when he wants to commit. And men, a committed relationship requires two people to be committed. Okay? That marriage requires sexual communication, not silence. So you should be able to communicate with your husband what you like, what you don't like, what you want, what you don't want. What makes you feel good? What doesn't make you feel good? You are not just his sexual being for him to have sex with you any kind of way. I remember growing up in the bed is undefiled. It is. It is. But two people get to determine what goes on there. Not one pressuring another. Not one coercing another. We both decide how it goes down if we swing it from the chandelier and coming down from the rooftop. Okay? We both decide that. You don't do anything that you're not comfortable with. And these are the conversations that we didn't get to have and no one had with us. So we went outside and we made decisions based off of the information that we had. And sometimes those decisions weren't the greatest. And if you feel that way, it's time for you to heal, right? It's time for you to address areas that you may be suffering, okay? And it's also time for you to deal with any self-blame and shame that you may have, okay? Now, I want you to know that this isn't me. I'm not blaming parents, churches, or schools. It's about telling the truth so the next generation doesn't suffer the way that we did. Because, yeah, there's a lot on TikTok or whatever, but you get to share your story. You get to tell your truth to the next generation. You get to teach them the truth, okay? And it's different coming from a person that they know, love, and respect versus somebody just on a screen, okay? Listen, I want you to know that you weren't reckless. The things that happened in the past, I want you to not condemn yourself, all right? I want you to do your healing work so that you can move forward, okay? I want you to, quilts, right? You ever see a quilt? There's different patches. This is just a patch in your quilt. There are lessons that you've learned and it's a part of your foundation, okay? This is Heal the New Sexy. My name is Cynthia. I love you so much, and I want to hear from you down below. What were you taught about sex? And what weren't you taught at all? I want us to have a conversation. And for my young girlies, now I'm 37, so anyone younger than that, I want you to feel empowered to make decisions as it relates to sex that respect and honor you. If that man is not respectful of you and not honoring you, then don't have sex with him, okay? Your body belongs to you. You are the gatekeeper of your body, and you get to determine who you share your body with, all right?